Michaela, how is your training different in your 60s in comparison to when you're in your 20s or 30s?
So when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was mostly running, so endurance running. So I would run probably an hour to 2 hours a day, like 6 days a week. And then I would go in the gym and just sort of do upper body because I didn't know a lot about weightlifting. And back then it was, that was many years ago. I don't want to say how many, I guess 30 years ago. And so back then, women kind of stayed away from heavy weights. And any weightlifting that you did do was, you know, really like probably 20, 15 to 20 reps and light weights. And so and I didn't think I needed to work my legs at all because I'm a runner. I don't need to work my legs. So it was all upper body. And now I think back and I think how kind of silly that was because the lower body would have really helped me with my running. But at the time I just kind of wanted to have a look, a certain look, which I find a lot of women do kind of train that way. We want glutes and we want nice arms and, it's not, you're kind of worried about your quads and, overbuilding certain areas. So I was kind of afraid of weightlifting. And now I find, now that I'm older and I became a trainer, and it's funny because when I first wanted to become a trainer, I wanted to become a running coach. So I was like, well, I run. That's what I do. I want to be a running coach. And I remember the teacher in the college I went to, he was like, he's a strength and conditioning coach. And he was like, well, why do you want to do that? You should be doing this. You should be doing hypertrophy training and strength training. And I really didn't like it that much. And now that's like exclusively all I do pretty much. I still run, but very little. Probably 20% of my training is running.
So, how did you convince yourself to get into strength training as opposed to just sticking with running?
I just fell in love with it after a while once I started doing it really for real, like lifting heavier weights and really kind of and seeing the effect it had on my body was really quite surprising because I always thought that I thought what a lot of women still think, which is that weights will make you bulky, make you look, you know, um, sort of chunkier. And I have an athletic body anyway, and I build muscle quite easily. And so I was really kind of afraid of that. My dad was a professional athlete, and he always said, "You have a body like mine, and don't lift weights; you'll get really big." and uh, and I absorbed that, and I believed that, and and so it took some reprogramming for me to understand that. Oh, okay, it's okay to lift weights, and it's actually going to benefit you and give you the look that long kind of toned look that women want.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the benefits conversation because not only is it important for your body, but it's in the way that we look in the aesthetics realm, where
Yeah.
often yes, do women do think, well, I'll get bulky or it'll make me look like a man. I'm going
Yeah.
to look too buff, which is, what I wish I could say, from lifting weights and what basically everyone, well, mostly men, like we try to do that on a day-to-day basis and, are often more unsuccessful than successful. So like if we can't do it and we have like so much more testosterone,
Yeah.
it's much more challenging, for women, though not impossible. But it's definitely a worthy venture. And I was looking at the research, and basically, if someone does nothing to counteract it after the age of 30, we lose around 3 to 8% of our muscle mass, and that's one of
Hmm.
the benefits that I wanted to talk about. So, how do you feel? Because you talked about the look that you were developing. How did you feel after? Did you feel different straight away, or did you not feel different? Did it take a while to kick in?
So I started putting on weight like I guess from probably 25 to 40, running kind of did it for me. I could sort of eat whatever I wanted, and running kind of kept me slim, and I looked okay, and I was happy. And I felt good because the running hasn't, gives you all the endorphins and you feel really good. And then around 45, 46, I started putting on weight around the middle, um, which is sort of the classic thing that women notice at that age. And I was like, what is this, and here, and I was like, oh, what is this? What's going on? And so I started running a little more, and, that wasn't working. I was just like, okay, what am I going to do? Nothing's happening here. And so a few other things happened in my life, and I decided I'm going to be a trainer, and like I said, I wanted to coach running. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become a running coach, and that's what I'm going to do. So when I went to school, that was when I learned about a lot of resistance training. Like, it was pretty much all that. So that's pretty much all I did. And it probably took a year, I would say, of really concentrated effort, with a good balanced program, 3 days a week, full body, full body 3 days a week when I started. And it was amazing. Like, I watched my body change. And actually, I would say I have probably not more muscle than I had back then, but I certainly look more fit than I did when I was running. So, I was sold, right? It's like, oh, sold. And not just the look, like you were saying earlier, not just the way I looked, but I felt so much better. I just felt just stronger and more capable. And, the weight started coming off, and I just felt so much better. And every year since then, I just feel better and better and better. And, it's pretty amazing. Like, I just turned 60 in January, and I feel probably the best in my life. Probably.
Yeah, that's one of the
Which
things
is,
that is like it sounds so great, and obviously it's true, but the 1 year that it takes can be where people get caught up, because it's such a new world. Like, I've coached a
yeah,
lot of people that start from scratch, beginners, never been into the gym, don't have an athletic body, highly
yeah,
academic, or just not raised around a gym setting or sport setting. And that 1 year is really tough. There's a lot of mental obstacles that they have to overcome, like just going to the gym and being surrounded by a bunch of people that are confident in a gym, when they're not, they feel like everyone's looking at them. Like, that's just one of many obstacles. So how did you navigate that? Like, obviously you were into running, you kind of had that sporting background and athletic background, as you said, but how did you overcome some of the things that people face so that people can walk away with a few tips?
well, I could tell you what I tell my clients, and because I work with almost exclusively women in midlife, so 40 and up to like 70. And I find, what I tell them is, don't rely on motivation, because motivation comes and goes. So we can't, especially in the beginning, you can't really rely on that. You need to just show up. And it sounds so simple, but it's just, hey, you're not going to feel like going to the gym. And especially when you're not used to it. And like you said, you go in there and you feel kind of intimidated. There's people who know what they're doing in there. And so I do recommend, if people can afford it, to get a trainer, because I do think it's good, even just for a few sessions, just to learn the equipment, or even just to have the gym owner walk you around and show you how everything works, because they're happy to do that. They want you in the gym. And learn how to, use the equipment, and get a program, from a qualified source, either online or in person, and just show up. Just consistent, be consistent. It only takes 2 or 3 days a week, right? And, from like 20 to 45 minutes, even as little as that to get results. But you have to be consistent. And so I think that's something, I think the problem is that nowadays, with all of the misinformation online and all of the get fit quick programs, people think it's going to happen in 6 months. I literally have people sign up with me in 6 months, or not even 6 months, 6 weeks later, and they're like, I haven't lost any weight. And I'm kind of like, oh, you know, like, it's going to take a bit longer. You got to give it some time. So I always tell my clients, give it a year. And some of them sort of balk at that. They're like, oh my goodness, a year? Yeah, give it a year of consistent showing up. And I try not to overwhelm them with too many things. So we'll start with the workouts and then we'll look at nutrition after. Because I find if you sort of put too many things in the bucket, people get really scared and over. It's like, oh, okay, I've got these workouts and then I've got to cut calories and I've got to eat more protein and I've got to somehow get fiber in and not go over on calories. And I just find it can be overwhelming for a lot of people. So I like to just start with one thing and then we add on.
Yeah. I think that's the best approach too, especially for people that are new, so they can bite onto something and get that, oh, I did this and I overcame it. Now what's next? And you slowly build up the self-efficacy and the confidence in the person so that they feel like they can tackle the numerous things. Because it is a bit of a checklist. You have your workouts, your steps, then you got to approach sleep in some way, stress management in some way. And then you can kind of like feel like a robot trapped in this box of trying to tick things off. And then you're like, oh man, I don't even like, personally, I screw it up all the time. I can't imagine someone that is trying to learn how to squat and learn how to count a calorie and learn what has protein in it to then try and master other aspects, which kind of just becomes your lifestyle as a personal trainer or as someone that's enthusiastic about fitness. But it definitely doesn't come natural for a lot of people. And even if it does, it's a bit of a struggle still. So, like, what would you give advice to your younger self now that you know what you know and you are a trainer? How would you change your trajectory if you would?
I think I most certainly would. I would have done more strength training earlier on, and maybe not done so much running. Maybe had more balance with my training. Definitely would have been lifting weights, like doing what I'm doing now, back then. So, and just we know more now than we did then, because I did have a trainer back then. And she was, we were lifting light weights and, not doing what people are doing now. And it was good, it was fine, but it wasn't as impactful as, what I'm doing now in my program and what I'm doing with clients. I would have never dreamed of deadlifting back then, I just wouldn't have. To me, that's like, that was for the guys, back then I would have never done it. And now I just love that, it's great.
Yeah, man. Like I'll say before the podcast, like we are basically trying to brainwash people to lift weights. And really we get nothing out of it, unless they work with us as a trainer. But the benefits largely outweigh, the time sacrifice if you're doing it correctly, which is once again a big thing. How you talked about having a structured program from a qualified source, not just chat GPTing, I need a leg workout and then going to do it, which my client recently did in Thailand while they were traveling. And I was like, hey, just ask me for a workout and I'll give you a much better one. He was like, oh yeah, we didn't really do half of it. And I was like, yeah, that's why you don't do that. Maybe in the future that's going to be a possibility, but at the moment that's it's a bit all over the place. And I would have a similar recommendation for myself, even though I didn't really get into running, I was lifting weights. I would have followed a structured program a lot earlier. Like I started when I was
Yeah.
14
Oh, wow.
in the gym at school. Well, I went to a really rugby dominant school back in New Zealand,
Mm.
and if you play rugby, it helps if you have a bit more muscle. It helps if you're a bigger guy. And I was a very small kid, so I was one of the small kids growing up, and I had a lot of heart, but I didn't have a lot of size. So I
Mm.
really fell in love with the gym to get better at sport. But I just did what the big guys were doing in the gym, and I'd look at them, and they were like shrugging 200 kilos, which I don't know is like 450 pounds or something. And and then by the time I left high school, I was doing that, but I was doing it with terrible form, and I always had a
Yeah.
really sore lower back. And then I was
Mm.
doing all these exercises, and I could feel like I would do certain exercises, and my shoulder would give way, and I just had so many blind spots, had so many holes because I was a 14-year-old to 16, 17, 18-year-old just doing what the big guys were doing and not considering basically anything structural or anything
Yeah.
balanced. So even though I got through it, and now I know how to like train myself out of those bad habits, having guidance early on would have saved me a lot of time and actually fast tracked me a lot. Like I think the first 10 years I did was a bit of a waste, to be honest. It was good in terms of effort and developing habits, but in terms of technique, training intensity, structure, knowing what I should do on certain days, it was a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah. I understand that. I can relate to that. Yeah.
So
Well,
what
it's
was one of
frustrating.
the, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say it's frustrating when you get a client and they've been working with a trainer for 5 years and you can't tell that they've been working with a trainer because they're not moving very well and you're sort of puzzled, you know. I get that quite a bit. Say, oh, I've been with the same trainer for 5 years and you know, and this they can't really squat properly yet, or you know, and they're not moving in a full range of motion. You know, they have imbalances, muscle imbalances, and I think that can be really frustrating as well as finding a good source, you know, a good trainer and a good program. And yeah, I find there's a lot of kind of not great resources for people
Yeah.
out there.
I, I I think the personal training industry is very wild, wild west. It's definitely been my understanding of that in Australia and New Zealand. I have trained someone in America, but that was like a one-off trip.
Hmm.
But in Australia and New Zealand, the thing that frankly pissed me off a lot was that no trainers, apart from the high quality trainers in the gym, which would you know it, were back to back and flat out and making the most money and were the most well respected, most of the trainers didn't have a program. So they were just walking around and freestyling it. And that
Yeah.
bothers me. Even now when I see people mainly online and they're like they've never followed a program before, but they're like, oh, I've done personal training before, or I've done even like group classes or something like that, but they've had no
Yeah.
structure, and people are paying for something and they're not getting a service. They're just getting oh, the bench is free, let's go do bench press. I'm like, why are you paying this guy or this girl? You shouldn't be freestyling it. That's not
Yeah.
like if you just do heaps of random shit, you get random you get random results. And that's
Exactly.
one thing that's bothered me about the personal training industry a lot is just the
I
the lack
agree.
of structure.
Totally agree. And I see a lot of it, you know, people doing different, oh, well, and then you'll get the clients that come in and they're like, this is boring. I'm doing the same thing all the time. And
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's kind of boring.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's boring by design,
yeah. You
you
have to
know?
repeat a lot of the same things to get great at them, just like many things. But unfortunately, in the
Yeah.
gym, it's like, yeah, you want to keep it exciting, which I understand.
Yeah,
But if you're always doing exciting things and doing the next best thing, you never really master anything, and that's a problem. You
exactly.
never get strong, which is what everyone wants to be deep down.
Yeah, I agree.